GOAT district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We are back-to-back nights in the GOAT District. Big shows, both nights. Billy Muzio, Dave Hubbard, last night. Go check out that show. I got a couple comments. Tris Tollefson, great information. I learned a lot. Anna Jimenez, friend of the show. She says this was amazing, but I hope no one else was listening. And tonight is going to be the same, guys. I hope you have a pen and paper. You have, for sure, you follow this man. You want to hear all the goodness. Redraft and Dynasty tonight. Senior fantasy writer Heath Cummings from CBS Sports. Welcome to the district. We are excited for this, my friend.
I am excited. That was a fantastic intro, and I appreciate you guys having me on. Looking forward to chopping up tonight.
Yeah, no, super stoked for tonight. We hit Redraft really hard last night. Definitely a show you want to go back and listen to. Tonight we're going to mix it up. We're going to talk a little Dynasty. We're going to talk a little Redraft. We're super stoked. JD and I have been kind of holding it down while the overhyped sleeper himself, Dan, is on his Clark Griswold-esque trip across the country. So we're closing it out this week with Heath. And JD, I'm just going to go ahead and get started on the Dynasty questions.
Jump into it, man.
Heath, you dropped a absolutely terrific Dynasty Sells article. What makes a player a Dynasty sell? And take it a step further, how can we exploit the market to sell non-obvious players at their peak?
Yeah, I think it's a like a 2 or 3 part answer, because and I'm maybe a little bit more cognizant of this because of being at CBS, but like there are people still playing in Dynasty leagues where the clear and obvious answer is just that 26 and 27-year-old running backs are the sells. And a lot of people in their leagues don't know that. So if you're in one of those leagues, that's the answer. Like running backs who are 26 or older, those are your sells, especially if they're still good. But I think the more like real answer is you've got to hit those guys that people are still excited about as top 10 running backs and maybe have not hit that age 26 mark, but are still just one injury away from things going absolutely terribly. We really underestimate, I think, the impact that a bad season or an injury can have for even a 25-year-old running back. So at running back, it just creeps up every year. And people, I think, that don't play a lot of Dynasty like to mock us, that like we're always just trying to sell the good players and buy the young players. And that's true to a certain extent, but it's so much better to sell a running back a year early than it is a year late, because a year late, you're dropping him, not selling him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And JD, sometimes those players that we're most uncomfortable selling in Dynasty really bring us the biggest returns, and we look back and we say that was a really the smart move for our teams. Isn't that right?
Well, it's timing, right? It's all about timing. Tonight, as we talk Dynasty, all this is about timing. And the biggest mistake I think a lot of Dynasty players do is they move big pieces at the wrong time of the year, right? If you have an old running back, second game of the year when he goes off for 2 touchdowns and 120, that's when you move that player. You don't move him now. You know, right now, the hot rookies, you can tell by the movement in the ADP, and we'll talk about some of them tonight, you know, which guys are hyping up, which ones are deflating in value. We talked about some last night. We're going to talk about it again tonight. That's what you have to be watching, and you got to time those trades properly, and we'll talk about that as we get through the show.
And I like how Heath also, when you write these articles, you will share like a target for a contender versus a target for a rebuilding team. I think that's really helpful. But let's talk about it. You named 4 players in your Sells article. Why don't you share those players with us in the GOAT District tonight, and why you would be selling them in a Dynasty League?
Yeah, it was 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb. I tried to avoid the super obvious running backs, but I mean, this is a little bit obvious as well. I think Mixon is someone like people forget, and I was on Mixon really hard going into last year. Everybody hated him. Like, it was nobody wants this guy who's the perennial high-end number 2 running back because we made the mistake of drafting him in the first round for a couple of years. And then he has a year that makes him worthy of being a first-round pick, but now he's another year older. And so now that everybody's finally getting back onto Joe Mixon, I'm ready to move off of him because I think, like, again, he's that guy that is just one bad thing happening away from complete disaster. And it's possible. In fact, I would say even hopeful that the Bengals decide, you know what, we have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Maybe we should not be as run heavy as we were last year. And I think you could just see his volume decrease a little bit, even if things don't go wrong. The other one was Nick Chubb. And Chubb's somebody I've kind of fought against for the last couple of years, and his perceived value remains really, I think, much higher than it should be. He does not have a long runway in terms of what he could be 2 or 3 years from now. 2 or 3 years from now, he's past Derrick Henry range, and he's no longer a sell at all. But also, I don't know with Kareem Hunt and with this whole mess of a situation that he necessarily has top 5 upside this year either. And so if a guy's not necessarily going to be, in my opinion, elite this year, and he doesn't have the long runway, I would like to move him before his value goes down.
JD, any thoughts on those 2?
Nothing really to add.
Yeah, I sold the Mixon share. I told Heath this in the pre-show. Mixon's a guy I really like in redraft, and this team was kind of in the middle of contender versus non-contender, and I got a nice return for him, a bunch of young assets in the 2023 first. And I think it's kind of funny because Chubb might seem a little more obvious, especially with the Watson stuff, but Mixon, you can almost exploit the redraft rankings at this time of year too, can't you, Heath?
100%, especially with running backs.
I just don't have either of those guys, Theo. I like Chubb and Mixon. I don't own them at all in Dynasty. They're just not guys. Like, even if I'm starting up, I look around and there's too many guys I like better than both those guys. Age is a big factor for me with these running backs.
Chubb's kind of funny because Chubb almost right now, because of the Watson situation and because the guy just, he never really has the juice. He might be more of like a player where you might want to sell him, but at this point you might just be pot committed to him and kind of ride it out because it's a difficult guy to sell, especially with the Watson news in limbo. What about your wide receivers, Heath?
Yeah, I think these guys probably draw a little bit more interest from most Dynasty players. It's Tyreek Hill and Deontay Johnson. The Hill volatility has kind of been taken into account. People are a little bit concerned about Tua. I don't know that people are making enough out of the possibility that Jalen Waddle just gets more targets this year than Tyreek Hill, but that one's been taken into account. I don't know that enough has been taken into account with Deontay Johnson, though. He is like, I get worried about players who don't have a ton of volume, but just have thrived on extreme efficiency. He's the exact opposite. He and Najee Harris both. Like, the fact that they've thrown the ball 650 times each of the past 2 years is the reason why Deontay Johnson's been a high-end number 2 or low-end number 1 wide receiver. I don't think there's any chance at all without Ben Roethlisberger they're going to throw the ball that much this season. And so I expect we'll see his target share come down, and I don't think Pickett or Trubisky is going to mean a big increase in efficiency for him. He's been so heavily dependent on the volume, and that volume's been so heavily tied to the fact that the Steelers had Ben Roethlisberger in the huddle, and every time they sent in a run play, he changed it to a pass. I think you'll see a huge decrease in pass volume for that offense, and I don't think Johnson has, you said the juice with Chubb, I don't think he has the juice in terms of efficiency to make up for that drop in volume.
No, for sure, and he's definitely the redraft rankings have expressed that as well. We've seen Deontay go, wide receiver 21-ish in some of these, football guys type tournaments. So I think that people do have those reservations.
Let's do a quick OTC, Theo. Let's do a quick OTC right now. Deontay Johnson, Heath, or Mike Williams?
Dynasty or redraft, JD?
Redraft. You're talking football guys. So let's
go redraft. Yeah,
just because that's the ADP right now.
Yep.
Yeah, in that tournament, I would go Williams for sure. I think Williams has a lot more upside than Johnson this year.
Interesting.
That's a tough one for me. I think it would be based a little bit on what I did with the wide receiver 1. I'm projecting these guys to be my wide receiver 2 in my builds. If it was they're very, very close. I would agree with Heath that Williams definitely has the higher upside, certainly touchdowns wise.
What about, let's do Dynasty quick OTC with DJ Moore?
I've got DJ Moore, I think maybe a full 10 spots ahead of Deontay Johnson in Dynasty. I still think and this has been a me problem with Deontay Johnson as well, because I would like it if a guy could have both volume and efficiency. And I really do hold against Deontay Johnson. Maybe it's just the fact that Ben Roethlisberger has not been very good the whole time that he's been on the Steelers, and he's had some backup quarterbacks. But I think there's a better chance that we're looking at DJ Moore as a top 5 wide receiver midway through the season than we are Deontay Johnson.
Give me DJ Moore as well. I just think I think DJ Moore's the real deal, and I think we'll have a season where he has an 8 touchdown season, maybe at least 6. It would be kind of nice for DJ Moore, but I believe in the talent. I'll agree with you on DJ Moore.
Yeah, it's super close. That's kind of why I gave those 2 names. All right, Theo.
Pivot over to the tight end position. You have Kyle Pitts, Dynasty tight end 1 overall. What are your thoughts on him for this season? Is he a good pick as tight end 3 in redraft? And can he return value in the second round of tight end premium leagues?
I hate doing this because I did it last offseason with Kyle Pitts too. I love him in Dynasty, and I can't get on board with the redraft ADP. I don't think it's fair to him. This guy just had one of the best rookie tight end seasons ever and did not live up to his ADP last year. And now we're going to draft him 2 rounds earlier because he went from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota at quarterback, and they added Drake London. I just don't I think it's more likely that Kyle Pitts is tight end 10 than that he has one of those tight end 1 or tight end 2 seasons this year. I still think he's going to be the best tight end over the next 10 years, without a doubt. I think he's a first round pick in Dynasty, but I think he's more I would not mind him as tight end 3 if he was going right in front of Kittle and Waller. If those 3 guys were all in the same range, I think it's close enough. That's fine. But he seems to go 1-2 rounds higher than them at every draft I do.
No, you're right about that. He's definitely
his zone hurting my heart. He's hurting my heart, Theo. As I look at my football guys I'm drafting, and I literally took Jefferson first and Pitts in the second round. But you know what?
He's got so much talent that you have that out at least, and that's great. That's worth a lot. And I didn't answer the tight end premium question intentionally, but I think he could do that. The thing I don't like is it wasn't just the fact that he only scored 1 touchdown last year. He didn't have a lot of catches either.
He did get the 110 targets as a rookie, which we like, and he did get over 1,000 yards. So you can make a bull case for him. I see what you're saying in terms of him being limited by the offense, and there's a chance that Drake London and him are co-alphas in this offense and kind of bring each other even in terms of what they can do. I'm still big on Pitts. How about pivoting back to Dynasty? Who are your favorite under the radar tight ends in Dynasty right now?
Probably the least or the most under the radar guy is probably Brevin Jordan. I liked the way he finished last year. And if you see these guys that come out of nowhere and have the surprise top 5 seasons at tight end, it's usually because they end up second on their team in targets, or maybe third, but close to the second guy. And I think he's got a situation there in Houston where I kind of like Nico Collins, and I don't hate him in the double-digit rounds, but they don't have that clear number 2 behind Brandon Cooks. And so there is an opportunity there for him to have one of those weird seasons where he scores 7 touchdowns. And I think he could really build on that. I like the player.
We love that. JD and I just took Brevin Jordan in our FFPC 125 best ball tournament team. He's been like an auto pick for me as a late tight end. I agree with you. We're kind of due for a Miami Hurricanes tight end to have another big time year after being spoiled by all those guys. So what do you think of Brevin Jordan?
I like Brevin. He's especially in the tight end premium FFPC realms. You get to take him late as your tight end 3. It's beautiful, especially if you can do a late stack with him. Last year he gave you five tight end 1 weeks on that offense. You know what I mean? So Davis Mills comes back in the second year, hoping to see some progress. He's more comfortable. He's got Cooks, getting attention, continuing to get attention. You hope one of these running back comes in and, gets a little more balance in this offense so that, Brevin can benefit from that. But I think what we saw last year is a really good first step. And you hope that he would build on that, especially at his price, guys. I mean, he's super cheap.
Heath wanted to throw 2 tight ends out. We discussed this last night with Billy Muzio and Dave Hubbard, 2 extremely successful high-stakes players. What are your thoughts on TJ Hawkinson and Dallas Goedert? 2 guys that maybe had a little bit more juice last year. They've kind of settled into ADP. People are not necessarily as excited for them, but they seem to be possibly a little bit more values. Do you view those guys as potentially elite tight ends in Dynasty, or are you pretty even on them?
No, I think potentially elite is a very good way to put it. I got into a lot of arguments last offseason because I think Hawkinson it's almost like the Joe Mixon thing. He got elevated to that elite tight end range. We were arguing Mark Andrews versus TJ Hawkinson last offseason, and Hawkinson hadn't done it yet, and he still hasn't done it yet. But now he's being drafted even later. And I still kind of think he's the same guy, most likely, who's going to be that mid-range tight end 6, tight end 7 guy. But I definitely think that the potentially elite's still there. We know how long it takes for tight ends to develop. Goddard is a little bit more interesting. I would think the way that he would do it now with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith there would be a big touchdown season. I just don't have a good read on how many more pass attempts we're going to get from Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, because I think they're going to need a pretty big increase in volume with Smith and Brown both there for Goddard to take a leap.
It's a weird tight end tier, JD, where Hawkinson's going. It kind of eases up a little bit with Goddard. We touched on it last night, JD, but kind of your thoughts on Hawkinson as a dynasty target, and what are you doing with him? And I know you're going late tight end, but would there be a point in redraft where you'd want to smash the draft button on Hawkinson?
Well, I was just looking at even just on Fantasy Mojo FFPC Dinos right now, based on this, Kittle's going right next to TJ Hawkinson in the 4th. I would way rather have George Kittle personally than TJ Hawk, even with the age difference. I don't know. Hawk is a guy you don't want no shares of, but it's not a guy that I want to be heavily invested in. I think in Dynasty, he definitely offers the upside. We're all hoping this Detroit Lions, offense put something together exciting this year. They've got some exciting pieces, especially when Jameson comes in. But I don't know. It's it's kind of the opportunity cost for me. It always comes down to opportunity cost. What else am I passing on to get that player? In some builds, yeah, I mean, I don't mind taking Hawkinson early. I mean, especially if you want to take Hawkinson early and then get your quarterback later and, pair him up with something like Goff, you're able to build a pretty nice roster around that in all the other positions. What do you think, Theo?
It's easy to stack the Lions if we're talking best ball. I do think Heath made a nice comparison with Mixon where, Hawkinson's a super, super clean profile where people look at him, they'll give him the benefit of the doubt on injuries. They'll constantly give him the benefit of the doubt, quarterback play, injuries. Look at him as kind of an elite talent.
He's like a fantasy darling, right? He's like a fantasy darling.
And Heath might have a point there that he's kind of always going to be in that 6 to 10 tight end range, kind of a purgatory player for you that's not really ever winning you your league. So he's interesting. He might be a guy you want to kick the tires on because you could get a guy like Dallas Goedert plus picks or Dallas Goedert plus something if you want to try to move on from Hawkinson, maybe get a guy in a similar tier. Speaking of rookies and prospects, who are some of the rookies that you're most excited for in this draft class, Heath? We did not have you on during rookie draft season, so let's backtrack a little bit. Which rookies are your favorites in this rookie class?
Well, I think Breece Hall for me is in a tier of his own, and that's the obvious one. But the wide receivers like Drake London, Garrett Wilson, and I had Treylon Burks right there with him. I'm a little bit concerned about the offseason he's had, not because I think he's out of shape or anything like that. It sounds like he's not. It sounds like it's a medical issue. It's asthma, and it's something that I don't really have a good read on why it's causing him to not be available for OTAs. So if that stretches into training camp, I'll really get concerned. But if he's there for training camp, I'm going to be very excited about him as well. And then I've got that group of Walker, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave. that I'm just not certain on. I think the guy I'm probably the highest on relative to everybody else is Dotson. I think he has a really great opportunity. I like his profile quite a bit, despite the fact that he didn't come out early.
Expand a little bit on Dotson. What made you kind of ahead of him than other analysts? Is it the draft capital, or you believe in the talent? What is your take on Dotson as a player?
It's the draft capital and the talent, and I kind of think there's going to be, from last year and probably next year and maybe even the year before, a couple of these 4-year guys that didn't come out because of the weirdness of the pandemic, but were good through 3 years and maybe would have in a different circumstance. And I think Dotson, he was phenomenal as a junior. And so I love the talent. I love the draft capital. And I don't hate at all the fact that he's had a summer with Carson Wentz when Terry McLaurin wasn't there.
He's got the hands, he's got the speed, and he's getting talked up by the beat reporters, and the coaching staff has been praising him. JD, I know you'd mentioned Dotson as a guy you tried to get more of, and you kind of had a similar take that people just weren't drafting him based on the draft capital that they spent on him. People were treating him almost like he was a day 2 pick when he was, a top 20 draft pick. What are your thoughts on Dotson right now, JD?
Yeah, totally. Like rookie drafts, Dynasty, he was a value. He was sneaking into that second round pretty often, especially in the earlier rounds. Theo, we're in some GOAT League ones that are earlier, and he fell through. The league that you just joined, the DPL, 3-time back-to-back champion right here. Just saying. Picked up Dotson at 205, 204, something like that. So when you're getting that value, like you said, Heath Cummings, that kind of draft capital, yeah, he goes to Washington, but Wentz can give something. And then now you're hearing with F1, you're going to start seeing Dotson's value go up in ADP. You're going to start creep up, especially late in those best ball drafts. Guys are going to be a little more aggressive on him, I think. So again, it's like we talked about yesterday. When you're used to buying your deodorant at $3.99, it's hard to pay, $7.99 or $8.99. So it's hard for me now when his value is going to climb up. I don't think it's there yet. I think you could probably get him in some drafts at a good value, especially in some redraft, like we're talking about best ball. But Dynasty, I think his value, because of the F1 being in the headlines a lot, I think that his value has probably crept up a bit. I haven't checked myself, but I'd have to guess that it has.
I do like the fact that even if, let's say, F1 does resign, their skill sets do not overlap.
Right.
Like if you're an F1 manager, you're kind of worried about like them drafting Drake London was the big rumor, and it just didn't happen. So you have a smaller receiver next to McLaurin. They could potentially coexist. And I think what's interesting is like fantasy Twitter and a lot of analysts were on a 3rd-round pick like David Bell well ahead of Dotson. They were head to head; they'd have him. So I think it's something we're gonna revisit this a year from now. But there's a lot of people who were on David Bell over Dotson, and it's kind of like I know more than the NFL teams type argument in many ways. It's just super interesting. And let's pivot to redraft. Which rookies are going to make the biggest impact in the redraft season this year?
I think it's just a lot of the same guys that I said, but like relative to their dynasty value, I do think there are some guys who maybe don't have a long career of dynasty production, but as rookies, because of the situation, can give you more than you would expect. The 2 obvious ones are Damian Pierce and Algier in Atlanta, just because the competition is so really, I don't think they're going to play Cordero Patterson at running back very much this year. I think that they're probably going to move him back into even more of a hybrid role. So I think there's room for both of those guys to get more touches than you would expect. Obviously, if Spiller can be the Eckler handcuff and something happens to Eckler, then Spiller's going to have a huge impact. And then I think a guy that I really was not very excited about, but the more I look at it, Jalen Tolbert, could just be a fantastic situation. It might not even matter if he is that good at getting open against NFL coverage, because he's going to be the 3rd or 4th guy they're looking at. And who knows when Gallup's going to be 100%. So I think Tolbert could be a guy whose redraft value really outperforms maybe what his dynasty value is going to be.
Yeah, we've liked talking about Tolbert on the GOAT District, haven't we, JD?
Oh, yeah. Again, situation, going to Dallas, they need somebody to catch passes. Cooper's gone. And again, the price is always the key factor. And when you're getting him, I'm trying to see right now where he's going in football guys, but I mean, I feel like across the board, Tolbert has been a value, and I don't think people have kind of caught on yet that, you know, he does have that opportunity coming. So before the hype starts building, you know, as we get closer to the preseason, go out and get your Tolbert pieces, go out and get your Dotson pieces, because you get a couple Wentz, you know, long bombs or Dak long bombs to Tolbert, or a couple nice throws to Tolbert, and you know, those values start to skyrocket.
Pivoting over to quarterbacks, Heath, you released your Dynasty quarterback rankings, and I think that the top of rankings would be guys that we would probably all agree on. But you had Joe Burrow in his own tier. Maybe you could kind of share why he's in his own tier, and do you believe that he can crack into that upper echelon, you know, top 2 or 3 Dynasty quarterback rankings with another very strong season?
I think he can, but I don't think what he did last year should be enough to get him there. Because the reason I put him in his own tier is because he is probably the most likely quarterback, or definitely top 2 or 3, to give you a decade of top 12 quarterback finishes. I don't know how likely he is in the current setup to finish as a top 3 or 4 quarterback on a regular basis. Like, he needs to have one of those wild efficiency seasons, or they need to kind of change their philosophy. And I don't generally like to bet on teams changing things too much the year after they go to the Super Bowl. Like, things obviously worked out pretty well for them. So he is in tier 3 for me. He's my number 6 overall quarterback in Dynasty. But I do think there's clear separation between the upside of guys like Allen and Mahomes and Kyler and Lamar and what Joe Burrow offers right now in terms of upside. He's just, now it's possible that he was that first year coming. We talked about it with Dak already. First year coming back from the injury, we didn't want to run him too much. Maybe he's going to run a little bit more and run as much as Mahomes does. But until we see either the pass volume go up or him add a couple hundred yards rushing, I don't think he's going to be a top 2 or 3 guy.
And I think it's interesting you bring up the pass volume, because we all have memories of like the shootouts towards the end of the season, but it wasn't like that to start the year for Cincinnati. It was a little more balanced, a little bit more run, and then they sort of aired it out towards the end. So it's a super interesting guy. JD, what's your thoughts on Burrow? Where would you have him in your Dynasty rankings?
Yeah, I mean, he's top 5. I do see Murray falling behind him, which I find odd in some drafts. So I do like that, especially if I'm, you know, want to start with an earlier QB, and Kyler's sitting there after Burrow. I kind of like when he falls there, probably because of the current situation and, you know, him not necessarily being settled out there in Arizona. But I mean, any of these guys are, you know, Burrow with the weapons they have, you got to think you're getting your value wherever you get them in these drafts right now. And I think Burrow is actually going at a nice value if you consider where most people rank him and where he's going. He's a nice get at his value, at his current ADP. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the kind of the reservations with him, and he certainly lacks, you know, the rushing upside. We're seeing with the truly elite quarterbacks. So he's definitely an interesting guy. This is a big year for him in terms of Dynasty, because I think he's kind of like at the cusp. Definitely an interesting guy. Like, when you see we have our Triflex or Superflex startups, Burrow's going extremely high. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's a guy that a year from now is gonna really gain value. But you can see why he's so appealing in that format.
Well, and I think people, because of his limited experience in the NFL, view him maybe as younger than he is. But he's older than Kyler and Lamar, and he's not really that much younger than Mahomes.
No, he's 25 and a half. I never even noticed that. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, he had the, you know, I think that's a great point by Heath, because, you know, he had such a short run at LSU that we almost kind of forget the Ohio State years. And we think of him like smoking a cigar on the sideline after hanging 60 on people, where in Ohio State, he was kind of on the sidelines a little bit. So he's kind of had a weird meteoric run to the top, but he's certainly not young. He's definitely an interesting one. How about any quarterbacks that you're very bullish on? Doesn't necessarily have to be a younger guy, but guys that you could see gaining value in Dynasty this year?
Well, I mean, like I'm pretty sure I'm higher in both Redraft and Dynasty on Jalen Hurts than just about anybody. And I understand the reservations in Dynasty. What if Jalen Hurts loses his job? And that's been the thing for a year and a half now. But I just look at what the Eagles have done. I think they might be the best team in the division. I think they're definitely as many bad teams as there are in the NFC. Unless things go terribly wrong, they're definitely a playoff team again. And adding A.J. Brown, I think people might be underestimating the improvement that Hurts could still make as a passer and how much easier things will be with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith as your 1 and 2 wide receivers. So I don't factor in the odds of him losing his job quite as highly. And I think if you see him lead the Eagles to a playoffs, maybe even win a playoff game and then get a contract extension, well, he might be ahead of Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I can see that one. And it's kind of hard to that was the whole thing this offseason was in Dynasty. They're looking to draft somebody. We've heard it for 2 years now that Jalen Hurts is not their long-term answer, but then they contradict themselves with their actions. They give A.J. Brown the massive deal. And Hurts has the elite rushing ability. If he makes a step forward as a passer this year, or if they just get a little bit more efficient with it. I mean, he did not make last night we talked about our redraft tiers. He was not in my top 5, but I would certainly have him like in my top 6 or 7. And I think he does have QB1 overall in his range of outcomes. That offense could be sneaky good, couldn't it, JD?
I mean, look at who they added, right? Like who had a better offseason than them adding A.J. Brown. I do want to make a quick correction on Burrow. He's my QB6, not my QB5, because Lamar is in the top 5. I'm looking at another.
We were already getting angry tweets about it, JD.
I know. I'm looking at the list here, and I'm like, I can't let people know I have Burrow in my top 5. He's top 6. But I'm with you, Heath. Especially earlier in the offseason, Hurst was a really nice value. He's kind of crept up. I was looking on my phone because I didn't want to get his name wrong, but we had Scott Connor on this show, Theo, and he made a comment that stuck with me. And you kind of made a similar comment, Heath, and like you said, Theo, the actions speak for themselves. Maybe Philadelphia believe in him long-term a lot more than they're making out to be. And they're surrounding him with the weapons he needs. And they didn't panic on going out there. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're building around him and they seem to have that confidence in him. It's just fantasy seems to not have to me, the narrative seems to be after this season, Hurst is out. And that's what people are cautious with. But I think Philly seems to be saying differently with their actions, like you said, Theo. And now, he's creeping up, but I think Hurst is definitely a top 10, at least dynasty quarterback for sure.
And not to make this too long-winded about Hurts, but I think it's really interesting is the way that it's kind of like all dynasty gamers and analysts at this point are so high on the 2023 class and with good reason. But Philadelphia is not going to be in a position to get Stroud or get Young next year unless they completely fall off a cliff or they make some massive move to get into the top 3. So they're not going to necessarily be in a position to go get a quarterback as well. So I think that, Hurts definitely could be like one of the sneakier dynasty buys this offseason. We totally agree with you on that, Heath. One player who we really can't argue about in terms of what he's done in fantasy football, he's a weapon of mass destruction when he's healthy, is CMC. Could we see him return to 30 points per game level this year in PPR? And how should we be treating him as a dynasty asset, Heath?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know that it's fair to expect him to return to 30 points a game. But if he gets to 90% of that, he's still 15% better than everybody else. So the upside he's shown us when he's been healthy, and it's so much better than the best of Jonathan Taylor or the best of Derrick Henry, that he doesn't have to get all the way back to what he was, at least in full PPR, to be just that much better than everyone else. I think how you view him in Dynasty is very much dependent on your risk tolerance. But if you're trying to win a championship, I don't know that there's any better. And I think he's a buy even then, because most everybody would rather have Swift, would rather have Javonte, would rather have Najee than Christian McCaffrey. None of those guys can touch his upside probably over the next 2 to 3 years.
I think
I totally agree with you.
No, Theo, I was just going to say that to me is the problem with Dynasty is the guys drafting Javonte ahead of Christian McCaffrey is just mind-boggling to me. I don't get it.
I do think that So if you were in a complete rebuild mode, JD, I could understand it. But I think that it's at the end of the day, you're trying to win championships here.
But you're starting a draft, right? If you're starting a draft.
We're talking start.
You know what I mean?
We're
like
talking startups.
Looking at ADP, it's hard to take Javonte. In my opinion, he's going like I'm looking at football guys, and he's going like 4 or 5 spots.
No, for the dynasty startup so football guys, McCaffrey's
he's
clearly
2.
1, 2, or 3. Yeah, he's 2.
1, 2, or 3.
But yeah, it's interesting in dynasty is like, it might be worth kicking the tires. You might be able to get Christian McCaffrey for cheaper than you think. Because I do think if you polled like your every manager in your league and you gave a valuation on Christian McCaffrey, I think there would be a wide range of outcomes just because there's been some people burned on, him missing games. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that you have to have an optimistic outlook with him. He certainly looks healthy. He's participating in things. He's not sidelined. And I think that it's kind of like wheels up for McCaffrey to kind of remind everybody just how dominant he is. JD, do you have any more dynasty questions for Heath, or can we pop it over to redraft?
I'm curious what you're doing with a guy like Debo. Just, his value shot up so quickly in one season. I'm a huge fan of Debo. I was a big fan, had him in a lot of dynasty leagues, and now I find like I want to move some of those shares. I saw one trade that was interesting to me, like Gabe Davis and a first for Debo is appealing to me, but I'm curious how you're approaching Debo right now with, him not necessarily being locked in San Fran, opportunity of him maybe going somewhere else. How do you feel about his situation and how you playing his value in Dynasty right now? Do you feel it's where it should be, or is it a little overpriced for you?
Yeah, I mean, Gabe Davis in a first sounds pretty good to me. I think he's one of those guys that's a different conversation if you're playing in 10 dynasty leagues than if you're playing in 1. Because I'm playing in 10, I don't really want to be without Debo just in case last year was real. But I definitely don't feel comfortable being overweight on him. I've got him as I think I have him 14th at wide receiver right now in my dynasty ranking. So a high-end number 2 wide receiver that I really don't expect to be anywhere close to 14th midway through this season. He's either going to repeat what he did and we're going to have to move him closer to the top 5, or he's going to fall outside of the top 20 because things have changed again. But no, it's like, as far as a value for him, that seems like a deal I'd be very interested in taking.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think like I think I'm probably taking the Debo side on that one, JD. Okay. Just because I think that range of outcomes wise, I think that he could absolutely be the real deal. And I think that a year from now, you might like him over the 2023 one and the Gabe Davis. But it certainly, you can make a case for him as a sell as well, because you could be selling off of his best year of his career type thing. And we might never see a return to, a top 2 or 3 wide receiver in redraft. Definitely an interesting one. Pivoting to redraft, the Kansas City running back situation is a mess. Is there a clear value for you in this backfield, Heath, when you look at CEH, Ronald Jones, or Jerick McKinnon, kind of relative to their ADP, or are you avoiding the situation altogether?
No, I mean, relative to the ADP that I've seen, it seems almost like they're all clear values. I did not like the McKinnon signing, and I felt more confident in that statement. But the thing is, I liked CEH and Ronald Jones at their ADP more than consensus before the McKinnon signing. And I know what the McKinnon signing is going to do. It's going to negatively impact their ADP a little bit. I did drop both when it happened because I think it adds to the uncertainty. It really shouldn't. I really don't believe that Jerick McKinnon should be taking the ball out of either of those guys' hands. But my hope and expectation for that situation is that they're going to use Clyde in the way that we all thought he would be used coming into the league, and that there will be more running back targets available because Tyreek Hill's gone, and there's more running back touchdowns available because they're not going to have quite as many gimmicky plays to wide receivers inside the 5-yard line. They've been the kings of that over the past 5 years. I think this is an excellent situation for Ronald Jones, one of the best offensive lines in the league, a team that you cannot stack the box against. And I still think he's a good runner of the football, and I just don't play him on passing downs. So he could have a Damian Harris type season. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
I think that's an awesome comparison to Harris's situation last year. They never use CEH inside the 5. He's not a guy they want to use around the goal line. It seems like even if Rojo's just a specialist and he's their short down and distance guy and goal line back, I think he could return value, in that 11th-ish round for redraft. And I think there's a chance that maybe he just passes CEH this year, and things don't go well with CEH. I mean, we're optimistic that CEH is going to make this improvement this year, but to me, Rojo might be the value. Dave Hubbard, who's one of the best FFC players, going around, one of the best high stakes players in the country, he's on the Rojo train as well. He talked about it last night, so that's interesting to see that. Darnell Mooney and Brandon Cooks, their ADP is very similar. Both guys are almost neck and neck. Both project to like a 25% or more target share. How do you approach these two players? And how do you balance target share and opportunity for players in offenses that we have question marks about?
I think it's even in Mooney's case, I still got a little bit of question about just how good of a player he is. Or is he just getting all the targets because they don't have anybody else to throw to? Those guys make me more nervous. For Cooks, and we saw his efficiency go down a little bit last year based off of what he's done in his career, but he is so clearly the alpha there in Houston. And he has such a long track record of both being good and beating ADP. I think 6 out of the last 7 years. I'm embarrassed to tell you where I have Brandon Cooks in my projections. I will promise you it's way, way, way above where his ADP is. Definitely one of my guys. I think he's a fine pick in round 3, and he goes in round 6 or 7 sometimes. So
where do you have him in your wide receiver rankings?
I've got him ranked at 12. I've got him projected at 6.
That's awesome.
Well, I think one of the things people might overlook about that Houston situation, and it's true about Seattle as well, as long as like Drew Lock's not just or Geno Smith's not the worst quarterback in the league. Those two teams were way below league median in pace. And so you look at Cook's target share, I think they're probably going to run considerably more plays this year in Houston than they did last year. And there's nobody that's going to challenge the target share he had. 134 targets last year was the most he's ever had. I think that's selling him short for this year. I expect considerably more.
You have to like Pep Hamilton being back there. Lovie Smith should add some stability, but Pep Hamilton seemed to get the most out of Mills, and they certainly, like we've seen Mills just lock in on Cooks. So yeah, I'm glad to see you so high on Cooks. And you talk about you have reservations on Mooney. Do you still have is it more on just him as a talent, or because it certainly looks to us like he's going to get 140 targets again, with potential for more in that offense, just based on there's not a whole lot around him.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot around him. I am a little bit concerned. I don't know what you guys are expecting the Bears to do offensively, or if you're just kind of viewing them as they're going to be average in terms of fingers. Yes. I kind of think they might be a pretty creative offense that is really run heavy. But no, I've got him projected for 145 targets. So I mostly agree with the target thing. I'm just not quite as sure that they're locked into the same league median pass volume, even though they're probably going to be a bad team. But no, I think he's mostly fine as a number 2 wide receiver.
And then just kind of in general, do you think that players that we find value in drafting players off of teams that might have question marks, or is it something that we should rightly be avoiding when there's tiebreakers versus good offenses?
100% as a tiebreaker, I would rather have the player on the good team. I don't want to make it too much more than a tiebreaker, if that makes sense.
No, for sure.
You're saying 145. I mean, last year he was the wide receiver 11 in targets with 140, right? And he finished like wide receiver 27. So if you think he's getting the same amount of targets this year, Allen Robinson's gone. Unless the expectation is that the offense is going to improve. You got to think that Fields improves though, and that Mooney does, build off what he did last year. Maybe he's catching more of those passes. I don't know, like you said, how much more he's getting. It's just you want him to give you more for that volume is kind of what's missing there. But that's probably are those guys going around the same ADP, Theo?
Yeah, Cooks and Mooney, I would say, are usually kind of neck and neck. Underdog, they're literally next to each other. And then in football guys there and NFFC RotoWire online championships, they're pretty close to one another. So it's always an interesting two players to look at when you look at Mooney versus Cooks.
Yeah,
it could be like league tilting type decision on when you have those two guys in your OTC. We're contractually obligated to ask each and every guest this same question. Every single guest since rookie drafts ended has been asked the same question. Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson are the clear top 3 wide receivers ADP-wise in redraft and in best ball formats. If you had to pick one wide receiver besides those 3 to finish wide receiver 1 overall this season, who would it be?
I'm going to go a little different because I often have talked negatively about this guy based on ADP over the last couple of years because his touchdown rate's just ridiculous, and I don't ever want to buy into that. But now that Gronk's not coming back, I'm going to say Mike Evans. Chris Godwin starting the year, maybe not 100%. I still think Brady's going to throw for almost 5,000 yards and 35 or 40 touchdowns. Now maybe 20 of them will go to Mike Evans instead of 14 of them. So I'll go with Mike Evans as the dark horse wide receiver 1.
If anybody's keeping track, there has been a lot of very sharp people on Mike Evans on the GOAT District over the last month. And I think for a lot of the reasons Heath is talking about, he's going to get absolutely peppered with targets to start the season. We like Russell Gage, but Evans is the alpha there. Evans
especially now that Gronk, for now he's not coming back. But if he really doesn't come back, I mean, red zone option. You see Gronk running down the field like a receiver sometimes. Mike Evans is a big guy, so you got to think that he's going to get a lot of that action if Gronk isn't back, and just add to what he's been giving you every year with the 1,014 or whatever it is.
And Evans, if Evans was, in my opinion, you see him going right now towards the middle to the end of the second round.
Yeah, he's going at the end
football
of the
guys and end of the second. So I feel like the reason you're getting him at the end of the second is because of his age. And I think he's a little less exciting to punch the Mike Evans button when you're drafting. So I really do think that you're getting like a discount based on the fact that he's, late 20s instead of 25. I think if he was just a little younger, he'd be going closer to that 1-2 turn, and he might be a 1-2 turn type value right now. Heath, I'll throw out an OTC: Devontae Adams or Mike Evans this year.
In full PPR, I'll still take Adams because I think Adams is probably going to have more targets than Evans. But I would like Evans in every other format besides full PPR.
Give you one more: young versus old. CeeDee Lamb versus Mike Evans.
Lamb's one of the guys that I haven't quite come around on yet to get as high as what it seems like everybody else is. I don't like Lamb in round 2 very much. And so I'm going to go with Evans. I think there's a lot better chance that nobody's dominated targets in Kellen Moore's offense. Now maybe Lamb will finally do it this year, but that's one of the reasons I like Tolbert is one of the reasons I've not been able to get Lamb into round 2.
Interesting.
Very quickly, for both you guys, we like to be able to be ahead of the market on players. Who is the 101 in redraft next season? We'll start with Heath, and then we'll go with JD, and then I'll give you mine.
I'm going to assume that it's the cowardly way is to say Jonathan Taylor again, so I won't do that. I'm going to say Justin Jefferson. I'm going to say Justin Jefferson just absolutely breaks wide receiver scoring this year, like Cooper Kupp, only he's younger, and so if everybody makes him the 101.
Gio, I talk about my drafts not because I think people care. It's because I feel like if you're going to talk about something, you got to back it up with actions. That's the only reason I talk about it. My football guys, I took JT over CMC at the 102. He's my 102 this year. I think he's going to be the 101 next year. I think he's going to smash this year. I just feel real good about Jefferson anywhere I can get him this year, and I think it'll be the same next year.
So Jefferson was actually going to be mine as well. I think Jefferson is a smash value. Dan Williamson and I fired him off, early off on an NFFC draft. I was taking an FFPC. You have to like the Vikings pass volume improving this year and Jefferson smashing. I will throw out though, same argument. Nothing. It would not surprise me if a year from now Jamar Chase was the 101 for a lot of the same reasons. And I think that if he comes out and has he could have just an absolute smash season, just like we're talking about for Jefferson. So I do think we're both on potentially a wide receiver being the 101 next year. And it's a great process to try to, project the first round a year from now. I think it's a very helpful process. Two players that we see flying up draft boards right now are Travis Etienne and Michael Pittman. What are your thoughts on these two players? They're red hot in high stakes drafts right now, Heath.
Yeah, I would be curious how high they've gone, because they've been flying up my rankings most of the offseason as well. I'm not sure I've kept up on Etienne though.
We've seen a mid-second Etienne. We've seen Etienne regularly at the
Mid-third.
2-3 turn,
Yeah.
and you don't get him later than early third these days. But you have seen him dip into the second round, running back 15-ish, running back 14-ish, and Michael Pittman has been squarely around wide receiver 12, 13, 14 range. So both of them are, inside of that third round all the time.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with Michael Pittman. I don't think he's a good value at that range, and you might even be closer to his upside than you are to his floor. But that's right about where I have Pittman, so I'm fine with that. I can't get that high on Etienne. I think it's just it's something we talked about with the Bears and the Texans, but I might need to see something go right for Jacksonville and Doug Peterson reverse the trend of his offense being worse every single year that he's in the NFL before I buy into anybody in this offense. I don't think they're going to make Etienne a workhorse back. So he needs to have one of those Kamara type huge receiving seasons, and he doesn't have Drew Brees as his quarterback. So I'm a little bit worried about Etienne that high, and it feels like maybe James Robinson just won't be any good at all, and it just that doesn't. But he's going to be there for training camp, I think. Not the start, but in training camp. I expect James Robinson's going to be ready for week 1.
Yeah, it's interesting. JD and I talked about this last night with Dave Hubbard and Billy Muzio, where they're starting to get, like you said, drafted at their peak range of outcomes. So it becomes interesting. There are two players I'm very high on. But again, it's all relative to ADP, isn't it, guys? So now we have a little less than 10 minutes left. We want Heath's guys. Give us your favorite players this season at each of the 4 positions. You can share one or as many as you're comfortable with. Which guys are you going down with the ship with that you're extremely bullish on that can help our listeners win their redraft leagues?
Well, this will be a little bit easy because we've already talked about a couple of them, so I'll be able to keep it a little bit shorter.
Brandon Cooks in Inc.
Yes, Brandon Cooks is definitely my guy as a wide receiver. I'll get to we'll find number 2 though. Jalen Hurts would absolutely be my guy at quarterback. I've got him basically tied with Lamar Jackson at QB4, and 100% think he has QB1 upside. On the lower end, I'm pretty optimistic that Fields is going to make an improvement and that Fields is going to be unleashed as a rusher. I think it's maybe a little bit underrated, the possibility that he could have a Jalen Hurts type season running the football. So Fields and Hurts are the 2 quarterbacks I probably am. I've actually got Fields ahead of Lance right now. I don't know if I'll be able to hold on to that all the way through draft season, but they're back to back. Running back is more difficult to pick my guy, but I think it's probably David Montgomery. That gets a lot of hate because there are a lot of people who think Khalil Herbert.
End the podcast now, JD. End it.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Herbert is just better than David Montgomery. A lot of people just really hate David Montgomery. But
I just took him at 5'11" in the football guys as my RB1.
That's just absolutely stealing. I think Montgomery's going to be a borderline number 1 running back. I've got him 10th in the projections and I think 13th in the rankings. So I love Montgomery. Cooks is definitely my favorite wide receiver. My guy might be Mike Williams. I think it's really underrated that he might just be the number 1 for the Chargers. Keenan Allen has been slipping just a little bit the last couple of years, and he is now already on the wrong side of 30, isn't he? Or will be turning before the season starts. Yeah. So I like Mike Williams a lot as a mid-range number 2 wide receiver that has absolutely top 10 upside. I don't know that I have my guy at tight end, but if I do, it's probably Cole Kmet. It fits with the whole, man, I love the Bears, I guess. What is going on?
Nice. I have so many Bears Detroit stacks in these tournaments for week 17. I love it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you guys had asked me who is your favorite under the radar stack, I would have 100% said the Lions. I think
Nice.
like they are the cheap team to stack.
No, we love it. This has been awesome tonight, JD. Maybe you want to throw out the sponsor since I always forget.
Yes. We didn't want to take up any of the valuable goatness, but guys, you know the drill. If you don't already, Underdog Fantasy, you can play for $2 million best ball. Imagine you win 2 mil. You're not only can you have the option to change your wife, but if the one you have now, you like her, she'll encourage you to keep playing fantasy. I mean, how much better can it get? Guys, use the code District Underdog right now. You can even draft other sports. I know basketball's over. You got baseball. You got all kinds of goodness on there. Go check it out. Season long. Use the code District, and you know where to get the gear, guys. Viridian Global. Get your GOAT gear right now. And our friends at FFPC, guys, they have so many awesome tournaments right now. You've got the main event. You can sign up right now, whether you want to draft in Vegas in September with Theo, Dan. I know they're going to be there. I'm still trying to get down south of the border. I will
smuggle you over the border, JD.
Smuggle me. I'm trying to get Billy to come pick me up on the way there. I know he's flying his plane down there, so I was trying to get a ride. But whether I'm there or not, guys, go draft in Vegas, the FFPC. There's nothing like it. You guys are watching this show in the middle of the summer. You should be in Vegas in September drafting live with these guys. It's a fun experience. You could play for $1 million, on this site. You can go play Dynasty right now. You can go play best ball, redraft, tournaments, small leagues, big leagues. It doesn't matter. Go check it out, myffpc.com, and tag one of us to get Theo or myself or at Go District for an exclusive sign-up bonus. We appreciate you guys today. We appreciate you, Heath. This was awesome. Tell the people where to find you. I'm sure everybody knows, but remind them of anything you have coming up. I saw you have a couple great episodes coming out on your YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find our Fantasy Football Today podcast on YouTube, anywhere you can find podcasts. Probably the thing that this time of year especially, am most proud of is our Dynasty landing page, where you can find updated rankings, tiers, mock drafts, trade chart, basically everything we've talked about here, all in one centralized location on the CBS Fantasy homepage in the top right corner. We didn't even have Dynasty coverage 4 or 5 years ago. And so now the fact that we have all this, it's about time.
It's crazy.
No, you're crushing the Dynasty content over there. It's the trade value charts. It's all very helpful, very good tools, and just putting out awesome content.
Yeah, and we've had Dave, we've had Heath now, so we for sure got to get Jamie on just to get the trifecta on the GOAT District. We hope you guys enjoyed tonight. Go check out our sponsors, show your support. Guys, keep drafting. The only way you're going to get better than everyone else in your league is to keep drafting and to keep tuning in. And you know how we do it. We'll check you all later.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Heath, that was awesome, man. We appreciate you big time.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, guys. It was a good talk.
Yeah,
awesome.
We'd
love to get you back closer to the season.
Yeah, I can do probably July. I can't do anything from August through December just because
Or regular season. He'd love to have you come back on in the regular season too. I know how busy you are this summer.
Right. But yeah, we'll definitely do this again for sure at some point. We'll get it we'll get the timing worked out.
Awesome, man.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Heath.
Take care. Have a
See
great
you guys
night.
later.
That was good, man.